Okay, it's Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Monday, the 23rd of November. I'm going to play another video by a fellow who's going to comment upon the Portsmouth Confederate monument that was destroyed back in June. As you may remember, one of the state legislators, a black woman senator, who I think is high ranking in the Virginia legislature, if not the majority leader of the Senate. She was arrested and charged with felony for contributing to the destruction of the monuments. An attorney in Virginia Beach was collecting signatures to have her recalled after this incident. And so what happened apparently last week is that not only were the charges against her dropped, but the charges against the other, I think it was 18 people that were charged with the crime of destroying the statue, also had their charges dropped. The black police chief, who was a lady that made the arrests, she was fired. And last I saw, she's going to be filing some kind of a suit or complaint about her job dismissal. So we'll see what happens there. I'm going to also provide a link that I found on the internet where this Senator Louise Lucas is shown to be saying to one of the police chief of Portsmouth that, you can't arrest these people. They're going to paint the statues. And it's city property and they have a right to be there. And I don't know the legal ins and outs here, but that doesn't seem right to me, but I don't know what the exact policy would apply there. I'm going to now switch to a video by Matt Christensen, who is a internet commentator out of Montana. I like him. I think he's quite good. This is the first time I've seen him make any video pertaining to Confederate monuments, so I really don't know where he stands. I think he does conclude here that the case against Louise Lucas may not rise to the level of a felony, but he does raise a case that, there's something really fishy going on here, and the fact that it's obvious that the memorial was destroyed. It was certainly appeared to be illegal activity, and nobody got arrested. Or, people got arrested, but nobody got convicted. Apparently, Portsmouth is a majority black population city, and in the most recent election, I think in the city council, all the white people have been turned out except for one. I might be wrong about that, but that's what I saw in the headlines. I am going to put a link below here to the confrontation between the police chief and Senator Lucas. It's brief. You have to listen carefully. You have to replay it several times to understand what exactly was being said between the two of them, but I'll leave that for you to decide for yourself what was actually said and whether or not it was illegal. I don't know where the recall election stands, whether there will be a recall election. I do know that some people are wondering whether or not Lucas ought to be impeached. So with no further delay, let me present Matt Christensen's remarks about this.
Remember that riot in Virginia back in June where the mob toppled a statue and it fell on a guy's head? The mostly peaceful protesters in Portsmouth decapitated soldier statues at the city's Confederate monument that's been standing since the Reconstruction era. On the way down, a Confederate soldier got his revenge and nearly decapitated one of the mob. Apparently gravity is part of the systemic racism too. That guy sustained serious injuries and was in the hospital for 4 months until mid-September. It was a scene of blatant disregard for property, blatant disregard for human life even, and blatant criminality. But these days, you know how the media covers that sort of thing. It was just a demonstration at the monument at which the man was injured. Yeah, sure, it was a little heated, but That was just demonstrators expressing frustration and anger.
Christopher Green was among dozens of demonstrators expressing frustration and anger over the Confederate monument in Portsmouth Wednesday night.
Yeah, well, that's true for any crime. Murder is also often an expression of frustration and anger, but it's not the expression of the emotion that constitutes the crime. It's the action. Throw a dart at a screenshot of a video from that night, odds are it lands on a crime. Vandalism, property destruction, trespassing, negligent endangerment. There are probably plenty of coronavirus health order violations, but according to the courts of Portsmouth this week, the actual number of crimes committed that night is now officially 0, not 1. As of Monday, all charges, including those brought against a high-profile state senator, have been dropped, a decision from the presiding judge at the advice of the prosecutors. In total, there were 19 people charged, including that state senator, local NAACP leaders, the city's top public defender, a school board member, and more. The charges included felony injury to a monument and conspiracy to commit that vandalism, but not anymore. Now those charges are gone, and so too is the police chief who tried to enforce them. On Monday, Chief Angela Green was summoned to a meeting at City Hall with the city manager, and she left with nothing but a spot in 2020's unemployment line.
Chief Green has just left the meeting.
Yes.
Tell me what happened.
Well, I was terminated, and I'm one less badge and a gun.
Somehow the only punishment in a story of a lawless mob of vandals destroying public property goes to the police chief who tried to hold them accountable. How we got there is somewhat of a complicated story, but as always, the only constant is systemic racism, of course. Even in a story where 19 mostly black suspects are relieved of their charges pursued by a black police chief. This entire event has been a power battle between entrenched political players and that police chief, from how the statue vandalism developed that day to how the charges against the vandals were ultimately dropped. The reason the vandalism got as bad and as dangerous as it did is because, like many other cases, the police in Portsmouth just stood by and let it happen.
Why didn't Portsmouth police intervene before someone got hurt? In a statement today, Mayor John Rowe says such action would have required force, which would have escalated the event and spread the vandalism to other blocks of our downtown with more injuries. Rowe says police officers made the right choice and didn't overreact.
Was that police passiveness at the direction of Chief Angela Green? No, at least according to her. Chief Green says she was directed by a politician, someone she won't name, to allow the riot to descend into the chaos that it did.
Were you told to let them spray paint the monument? And then when you started investigating, were you told not to investigate it?
That is correct.
And who told you not to investigate it?
That will come out during the legal lawsuit.
Piecing it together, the police chief is making reference to State Senator Louise Lucas, Virginia's most senior black legislator. She's been in the Virginia Senate since 1992. Throughout her tenure, she's been advocating for the removal and relocation of that Confederate monument in her district in Portsmouth. Part of the reason we know the police chief is talking about Senator Lucas is because Lucas was at the monument that day, urging the police to stand down. She streamed much of it to her own Facebook page. It's hard to hear exactly what Lucas is saying in the video, but she can be seen approaching police, including Chief Green, and by Lucas's own description, she was telling police they were not to arrest any peaceful protesters, as they had the day prior with 2 NAACP activists for trespassing. Lucas says she told the chief these protesters are not to be arrested per instruction from the city manager at the time. Lucas, of course, doesn't have any command authority over the police chief, but the city manager does. According to the police chief, that's why there was no police intervention until the collapsing statue collapsed that guy's skull. And for that meddling, the chief brought charges against Senator Lucas in addition to the 18 others. It wasn't for direct vandalism of the statue in Lucas's case. It was for conspiracy to commit that crime, as in she organized and aided the criminals who did it. Lucas was not present during the worst of the vandalism that night. She had been gone for hours. She didn't do any of the direct property damage herself. And there are some legitimate questions about the charges in Lucas's case. The police chief brought them apparently without the cooperation of the district attorney's office. Now, is that due to corruption or is that due to a weak case? It depends on who you ask, but that is unusual. The strength of the case against Lucas has also been questioned. Is it really felony conspiracy simply to stick your nose into police business? It might be unethical, sure, but is it criminal? There's not a lot of evidence that Lucas encouraged or aided criminality or obstructed police, just that she expressed opinions that may be criminal adjacent. Senator Lucas and her lawyers say the police chief's actions are politically motivated. They say that the chief only brought the charges against Lucas the day after Lucas and her legislative colleagues called a special session to consider police reform bills. But the political battle between these two was at least months old by that point, and it appears to have been initiated by Senator Lucas herself. Lucas was calling for Chief Green's firing immediately after the statue incident in June. Hilariously, back then, Lucas said the chief's failing was being too light on the protesters. Lucas said at the time that the chief had to be fired because she, quote, abdicated her responsibility to maintain peace and failed to uphold the law. But then when the chief does uphold the law and brings charges, suddenly Lucas says she has to be fired for being too heavy-handed and acting with political motivation. And fine, maybe the charges against Senator Lucas were a stretch. I certainly have my hesitation about the aggressive pursuit of speech crime. But how does a stretch in that particular case explain dropping all the other charges against everybody else? Maybe Senator Lucas committed a crime that day, maybe she didn't. But to the extent that public property was destroyed and a guy was nearly killed, crimes were absolutely committed by others, yet nobody is facing accountability. It seems highly likely that improper political motive and influence from Senator Lucas have some explanatory value on that one. But of course, never forget what always has explanatory value to the otherwise unexplainable: the get out of logic free card whenever the facts of the case have you backed into an intellectual corner. Systemic racism. Yes, even when you're a black politician in senior levels of power, even when your majority black city is policed by a black chief, even when the end result is that you and your black friends are totally pardoned of your criminality, you are still a victim of the almighty God of victimization, systemic racism. You see, the charges brought against Senator Lucas were racist, she says, because she's a prominent black official. She's being racially persecuted by the black police chief who was put into place to correct, yeah, you guessed it, prior claims of systemic racism. So it's racist to go after you, Senator Lucas, just because you're black. But it's not racist for you to go after your enemies even though they're black. That sounds a lot more like a convenient way for you to do whatever the hell you want than it does any sort of moral or legal principle. When you and nearly 20 of your friends enjoy a crime spree at the expense of the taxpayer and a dude's cranial integrity, and you face no accountability for it whatsoever, that sounds like you abusing power, not others. When you constantly emphasize your race in pursuit of special treatment or immunity, that sounds like you leveraging racial privilege, not others. Case in point, will Chief Green get to emphasize her race for special treatment? She's now planning to file a wrongful termination lawsuit against the city, but somehow I doubt that Senator Lucas will come to her defense on that one with the same race-based arguments, because of course not. It's not a principle, it's just a personal weapon and a shield. It protects Lucas while it strikes down her enemies. No word yet on what that downed monument will be replaced with, but it is on the way out. Here's hoping for something anti-racist enough to quell the unrest in Portsmouth, though I doubt such a display exists. Since we probably can't go meaningful enough, why not just go meta? Make a statue of a guy getting his head smashed by a statue. If it makes you feel better, label the guy getting smashed as systemic racism. It's funny, it's on brand, it's a good compromise, plus it commemorates the moment that systemic racism died in Portsmouth. Because that was the deal, remember? You guys get to smash the statues and then poof, the racism goes away. And since the city held up its end of the deal, I don't see a problem with giving the next round of vandals a reminder. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel.
Okay, that is Matt Christensen. He's a internet commentator out of Montana. I like him. And if you want to protect Confederate statues, again, I recommend my book, Causes of the Civil War. You can buy it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble for $22. If you want to get a signed copy from me, it's $25. I'll pay the postage. And what you should do is contact me, Phil, P-H-I-L _ Lee, L-E-I-G-H, at me.com. There's the spelling of my name. I think they're at the bottom. I can't quite see it. Okay. And so for Phil Lee and Civil War Chat, until next time, thanks for watching.